is CGTN, China Global Television Network. Live from London, this is Global Business.
Hello, welcome to the programme. I'm Jamie Owen.
And I'm Robin Dwyer. Our top stories. After months of talks, Germany gets a new government, its first ever three-party coalition.
Our other headlines: Poland warns lockdowns could return if COVID cases don't drop, as the EU says European countries should consider boosters for all adults.
Japan becomes the latest country to release its oil reserves to cool the cost of crude. Will it work?
And out of this world, sci-fi gets real. The mission to knock an asteroid off course.
Germany has a new government. After 2 months of talking, a coalition between the Social Democrats, the Free Democratic Party and the Greens has been unveiled in the past hour.
It'll be the first time the government will be made up of three parties, all from very different political persuasions. Well, let's talk now to our correspondent Ryan Thompson in Frankfurt, who's been following events for us. Ryan, what more can you tell us? What more do we know?
Hi there, Jamie. Well, it's been a long time coming because, of course, we had elections at the end of September, and then it was 2 months of these intense closed-door discussions between the Social Democrats, who came out on top in September's polls, alongside the Greens and the Liberal Free Democrats. Now we are seeing a much clearer composition of government that hopes to be in place in the Chancellery and in the German Parliament by early December. We are thinking late next week, possibly, or at the latest the week after that. But it has been a long time coming. Lots of discussions, lots of back and forth to figure out, because what's interesting here, Jamie, is this is really the unthinkable coalition as it was just a few months ago, because at the center you have these Social Democrats, but on the left you have the Greens, and then on the right you have the Liberal Free Democrats, who tend to be pro-business, and the idea of those two working together seemed unimaginable.
Yeah, well, it's an unusual marriage of political parties, isn't it? What more do we know about what this new government plans and its realistic ambitions?
Well, of course, Olaf Scholz, the former finance minister under Angela Merkel's government, will head to the top spot in government. He will be the man we call Chancellor for the next 4 years. We are trying to figure out who will be in the number 2 position, which is often believed to be the finance ministry. And then, of course, how the other ministries will be divided up. We have a better picture today after hearing that initial announcement and listening to the news conference, where they gave details about which party will be responsible for naming a head to which ministry. The SPD, Social Democrats, seem to have at least a hold on the security positions, so that includes the Interior Ministry as well as Defense. The Greens are going to take the Economy Ministry as well as the Foreign Ministry. And it looks to be a quite good day for the Liberal Free Democrats, who, despite having a lower vote count and arguably being in a bit of a weaker position here compared to the Greens, have cleaned up with 4 ministries, including finance, education, justice and digitalization. Of course, finance, as we said, is one of those key ministries that everyone was fighting for, because not only is it believed to be the number 2 spot in government, but of course, we're also talking about Europe's largest economy and a real player within the Eurozone.
Ryan, the promises are easy, aren't they? But delivery is more difficult given the current economic landscape amid a pandemic. Lots of promises over a greener Germany and a digital society. But can this coalition really deliver?
Well, they say they can. There's 2 big promises, 2 big themes that are at the center of this so-called traffic light coalition. One, you touched on it there, that is digitalization. The other, climate change. That one very key for the Greens, especially when they were making their run for the office, and a lot of the support they were throwing behind this grouping of parties. Of course, the challenge that really awaits them once they do take office will be the COVID crisis. Just last night, they were summoned to emergency meetings at the Chancellery with Angela Merkel. They will have to sort that out, and that will likely be at the top of their agenda for the next 2 months. But then they would like to dive into really modernizing this economy, cleaning it up from the COVID crisis. Olaf Scholz hinted today about a lot of public-private partnerships, including using stock options to really reform the pension program. And we're also hearing about a pretty significant change to Germany's ecological policy. This was a key issue in the run-up to the campaign, the issue over coal phase-out, because Germany brought in a new climate law not so long ago, but it was not compatible with the current phase-out of coal. Now the three parties are saying that instead of 2038 being the end date for using coal power, they are moving that up 8 years to 2030.
Ryan Thompson in Frankfurt, thank you very much.
Poland is warning that lockdowns could return if COVID infection rates don't drop. Coronavirus cases there have increased 17% from a week ago.
All this comes as the World Health Organization says a further 700,000 people could die by March in Europe and Asia. However, the European Commission says vaccines are having an impact.
The three most vaccinated countries, Iceland, Portugal and Malta, all have lower death rates than countries where vaccination rates are lower. Whereas the three least vaccinated nations, Slovakia, Romania and Bulgaria, have high mortality rates. Let's talk now to our correspondent Andrew Wilson in Oxford. So, Andrew, this, of course, is a complex and somewhat uneven story for politicians and public health officials to manage.
It's difficult, isn't it? And that figure of 17% that you quoted for Poland, if you take that across Europe as a whole, all their infection cases are up an average of 11% on the week. So it's pretty much across the board, although some countries like Poland now, Slovakia, Czech Republic and Austria and famously Germany as well are starting to see sudden rises in those figures. It's to do with the vaccination and it's to do with the weather. The Delta variant is at present in Europe doing what it was doing in July in the UK. And in the same way in the UK, we found areas where vaccinations were low or conditions were poor, certain vulnerable areas, the Delta variant would find those quickly and exploit them and the infections would spread. The same thing is now happening in Germany. And although some of those countries that you listed have very high vaccination rates, some have very low vaccination rates, and on average, you've only got about 50% of the adult population in Europe fully vaccinated. That's, as far as scientists are concerned, is not enough, and it's giving opportunities to the Delta variant to spread, to bed in and dominate local areas, which is why we're seeing these alarming rises in figures, and now particularly Austria and Germany taking off. The German medical authorities are in real despair at the moment. They're worried about their hospitals filling up. They think they could face a real crisis in their healthcare system. And Germany alone is worried about 100,000 more deaths over this winter. And that's the second element, the winter. The colder months, people spending more time indoors, and also viruses tending to flourish more in colder temperatures than summer temperatures. And so this is another dynamic that is giving real concerns to the authorities across Europe. But as you said, and as you'll see now from my report, it's a very mixed picture. It was Austria that led the way, clamping down on the estimated 2 million unvaccinated and then pushing further into another full lockdown phase after reporting record daily infections again. But now Germany is also ringing the alarm bell. Its hospitals are filling up, with doctors saying they're in the grip of a fourth wave. Infections here are also at record highs. Scientists are saying the country could suffer another 100,000 deaths this winter.
Nobody had the guts to take the lead and announce unpopular measures, and this lack of leadership is the reason we're here now. We are between two governments. No one really decides, and you rub your eyes in amazement that we are in this situation now.
The German government has stocked up on vaccines and boosters and is appealing to the public to take advantage of supplies.
We have up to 50 million of the two mRNA vaccine doses available for the first, second and third shot until the end of the year. This is enough for all vaccinations.
Although Europe has reacted late to the vaccination requirement, there are signs that the public is now responding. Over 50% of over 70s in Spain, for example, have now had their booster. But the Netherlands has reported record cases this week, Sweden has announced plans for a COVID pass, and the Czech Republic and Slovakia also now have plans to clamp down on the unvaccinated. However, in Austria, there's been a marked surge in vaccine uptake.
The vaccination rate has increased here in this center and across Vienna, but also in all of Austria. 2 weeks ago, we had around 1,000 vaccinations per day here in the Austria Center. Right now, we have reached 12,000 to 13,000 daily vaccinations in this center alone.
But still, a significant percentage of the European public resists government measures, and demonstrations like this one on the streets of Brussels are likely to become a feature of this coming winter across the continent.
So, Andrew, that's the picture across Europe. But how does the UK fit into this?
It's interesting. I was looking at some of the results coming out of Israel as well, which seems to mirror the same medical and pandemic situation that the UK has. Both were hit by the Delta variant in the summer. Both have now relaxed restrictions, and both are now pushing a booster campaign extremely hard to try and keep off the virus and keep the immunity up amongst the population. The UK had this advantage of getting in early with its vaccinations, but also lifting restrictions with a fully or almost fully vaccinated population in the summer months, where people spent time outside. They were spent less time in confined spaces, and as I said before, the higher temperatures meant the virus found it harder to travel. That may have given the UK a bit of an advantage. It certainly seems to be playing out in a similar fashion in Israel as well. But both countries are depending very highly on a booster vaccine campaign to keep that going. And there is, of course, winter to come here in the UK as well. So although they're optimistic that the UK may have survived the worst of the Delta variant, there is still some unexpected data to come, they're all sure.
Andrew Wilson, thanks very much.
Well, the tide may be turning on Croatia's vaccine hesitancy after the government there imposed restrictions to curb a rise in cases. While the introduction of COVID passports was met with one of the largest anti-government protests in years, it looks like some are now rethinking the jab. CGTN's Alyosha Milenkovic reports.
Up to 1,000 people lining up in Zagreb to get a COVID-19 shot. Some wait for a booster dose, some a second jab, and most for their first inoculation.
Under 50% of Croatia's population is fully vaccinated. That figure has cast doubt on the government's ability to successfully combat the epidemic and has necessitated the latest anti-COVID measures.
That's why the Croatian government decided to limit gatherings and widen the use of so-called COVID passes. Now anybody wanting to work in a government institution must present a certificate of either a vaccination, negative test result, or recovery from COVID-19. The number of those wanting to get a vaccine started rising.
It's related not only with the introduction of the COVID passes, but also with the big numbers of the newly infected and increased numbers of the COVID fatalities. That push people to get vaccinated.
But the decision to introduce COVID-19 passes has led to massive anti-government protests in Zagreb. Last weekend, tens of thousands were in the streets of the capital. But not everyone was in agreement.
They don't understand how serious this is. The entire world is gripped. I fully understand everything that the government is doing. It's all fine.
And while Croats are divided and question whether the government went too far with the latest measures, some foreigners are coming here because of the jab. Here is a line exclusively for visitors who pay around $20 to get a COVID-19 shot. These are Russians, and their guide is explaining the procedure. Back in the center of town, we met Maria, who came from Moscow to get a Western vaccine, so she could get the EU COVID certificate and freely travel to the West.
I'm here to travel and to do the vaccine, like both, because we didn't travel for a while, and Croatia is open now for tourists, so I decided to combine.
Faced with a choice, to get a jab or to have restricted access, many are choosing the vaccination. In Croatia too. Alyosha Milenkovic, CGTN, Zagreb.
Samsung is to build a $17 billion semiconductor chip factory in Texas. It comes after pandemic-related supply chain issues led to a global shortage of silicon computer chips vital to electronics manufacturing. Samsung hopes to alleviate the pressure with a huge plant near the city of Austin. It's the South Korean firm's biggest investment in the United States.
Apple is suing an Israeli cyber company that sells software to governments to enable them to hack into iPhones. Apple says it wants to ban NSO Group's use of its Pegasus spyware to attack Apple software, services or devices. The iPhone maker is the latest in a string of companies, human rights groups and journalists to take issue with NSO.
The EU Parliament has agreed partial reforms to the EU's common agricultural policy after 3 years of negotiation. The changes are aimed at improving support payments to small-scale farmers while meeting EU environmental targets. Several lawmakers oppose the reforms, claiming large-scale producers will continue to receive the biggest subsidies.
Digital currencies have plunged by as much as 25% in India after the government there announced a bill aimed at banning all private cryptocurrencies. If approved by Parliament, the legislation would also lay the groundwork for the creation of a central bank-issued digital currency.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead. Sales of electric cars are speeding ahead in China. We take a look at what's on offer.
Search CGTN Europe wherever you get your podcasts to subscribe to the Agenda podcast. The Agenda with me, Stephen Cole, always gets to the heart of the story. Just subscribe today and listen now.
Events have consequences. Words create impact.
One more offensive in a long line of battles that's been ongoing for more...
Just got to be careful here with some gunshots. Excuse us, excuse us.
The world today matters for your world tomorrow.
The number of casualties is growing quickly.
Why, this is one of the hardest hit towns in the region.
The world today, every day on CGTN.
Facing the unknown is always difficult. In a world in turmoil, it's easy to lose orientation. But when the storms come, we have to see the possibilities, reinvent, find new opportunities, discover a path forward. CGTN. See the difference.
The world has changed under the pressure of the pandemic. For many of us, life is returning to some kind of normal. As we're adapting to changes in all of our lives, let Global Business Europe be your guide to the new normal. Join us weekdays on CGTN. Hello, welcome back to Global Business Europe. Quick reminder, CGTN is available to watch for free on all of the major digital platforms, on Smart TV or online at Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire and Android TV, YouTube, Dailymotion, CGTN.com and the CGTN app, and in the UK on Preview.
Japan has agreed to release oil from its reserves as part of a United States-led effort to help reduce global oil prices. Other large oil-consuming countries have also agreed to free up reserves, including the UK and India, while China says it will release crude oil from its reserves according to its needs. Let's talk now to our correspondent John Terrett in New York. Hello to you, John. So what's behind this move by the Biden administration?
Hey, Robin. Hey, Jamie. Well, I think this is a big story. I really do. It's a global story. We've never seen, certainly in my lifetime, I can't remember, all these leaders agreeing to release their oil reserves in one go. I mean, not in one go, but at this time going forward. And you've got China and Japan and India and the Republic of Korea and the UK all in there, and India as well. So I think it's unprecedented. And what will happen is the oil companies will top up those reserves for those countries over time. Now, in America, of course, there's always an alternative reason for doing something. And so it is true with President Biden, because he is being blamed right now for inflation, which is rising quite alarmingly here in all sorts of areas, but is best encapsulated in the rising price of what Americans call gasoline and the rest of us call petrol. So here's an example for you. Last year, Americans were paying $2.10 a gallon for their petrol, their gas. I realize that's a lot less than you pay in Europe. Now they're paying $3.40 on average, and that is about a 50% increase. Now, President Biden has one eye on the congressional elections coming up next November. Campaigning starts January the 1st after New Year, and he's in danger of losing his very slim majority in the House and his even slimmer majority in the Senate. Now, the strategic reserve which he's releasing is supposed to be used for wartime issues. It was created back in the 1970s. It's supposed to be wartime or disasters. In fact, Obama released a little bit in 2011 after the Libya crisis, and Bush did in 2005 after Hurricane Katrina. We've never seen anything on this scale, though. Here, it is being seen as a Band-Aid on a longer-term solution. It is likely, I think, to bring prices down in, if not the immediate term, then the short to middle term. And I tell you as well, guys, there is no coincidence whatsoever in the timing of this. The President made his announcement yesterday, 2 days before the major public holiday of Thanksgiving, which is the biggest of all the holidays, in my view, here in America. And thousands of people are going to be driving to see their relatives and friends for the first time for 2 years. And many of them are wondering how much extra it's going to cost them and how much of a pinch on what Americans call the pocketbook it's going to be. Guys?
But, John, has this strategy worked when we saw oil futures go up in price?
I know. I just checked a few moments ago, and here's the bad news, folks. Are you ready? What they call WTI, which is West Texas Intermediate Oil, or Texas T, as we know it here, is by 0.5% for January delivery and by about 0.4% for delivery in February. So on the face of it, no, certainly not. And the reason for that is that Biden's releasing 50 million barrels, a lot less than Wall Street had been anticipating. Also, OPEC, in the form of the Saudis in particular, is refusing to increase production to bring down prices. Now, there's a meeting of OPEC next week. We'll see what happens. This could really cause some tension, though, between Washington and Riyadh. And it is worth pointing out, and it's not widely been reported, that actually oil is down at a 7-week low, around 10% in the last couple of days, just on the rumour of this happening at all. But the problem is the oil companies are not passing it on quickly enough to the customers, so you don't see the reduction at the pumps. President Biden is blaming them and wants an investigation to see whether they've been price gouging customers or not. Many people think his environmental policies are forcing them to keep their prices high as long as possible because they'll make less money when the environmental issues kick in. He denied that yesterday. So in summary, it seems as if the White House has come up with a plan that is really a bridge between now and sometime next year, when economists think that gas prices or petrol prices and overall crude oil prices will stabilise. Robin and Jamie?
John, thanks very much. John Terrett there in New York.
Well, let's talk to Ellen Wald, the president of Transversal Consulting, who advises a range of industries on energy and geopolitics. Ellen, good to see you. For those of us who are not oil industry experts, give us a bit of historical context here. I mean, how about these latest movements on the global oil market? We've been here before, haven't we?
Yes, yeah, sure. So what's interesting is we've been seeing oil prices climb rather precipitously in October and November. And then last week, they did take a bit of a tumble, not so significant, but they did drop below the $80 per barrel mark, which is somewhat significant. And part of the reason for that was because Austria announced it would be instituting a general lockdown because of the pandemic, and there is rumor that other European countries could follow. So that, combined with these rumors about the SPR release, definitely sent oil prices down. However, there were some indications that oil prices might be calming down, though there is a divergence between different forecasting agencies and banks as to whether we are about to see some kind of stabilization in terms of oil prices, or whether the prices could just continue to rise, perhaps even to the triple digits by next year.
Well, releasing these world oil reserves doesn't seem to have had much effect. I mean, aside from that, are there other policy tools to try to bring down energy costs?
Oh, absolutely. One of the reasons that overall energy costs are up is because there really is a natural gas shortage in Europe. And over the past, decade, a lot of the world, particularly Europe and the United States and also in Asia, has converted to using natural gas for power generation, which is a much cleaner fuel than coal and oil, but that leaves these areas vulnerable to spikes in natural gas costs as well as supply issues. So that's part of what we're seeing now. And there is concern that a lack of natural gas might lead power generating facilities to actually switch to oil, and that would increase the demand for oil, which in turn is helping push up the price of oil now.
Every action has a reaction, as my old physics teacher used to say. What steps should we now expect from OPEC? What are they going to do next?
Yeah, that's the big question on everyone's mind, because now that the U.S. has decided to release 50 million barrels from its SPR, and there will be more coming from other countries, the question is, OPEC has basically planned to increase production by 400,000 barrels a day each month. They've been doing this for quite some time, and they plan to continue it into the new year. But this was seen as not nearly enough supply by the Biden administration, also by India and Japan. The question is, will OPEC react negatively to the SPR release and decide to curb its planned increases? And all the indications we're getting right now say no, that OPEC is planning to continue with its moderate increases in production.
Ellen Walls in the United States, thank you very much for talking to us.
Thank you.
Well, as John Terrett was telling us, it's the day before Thanksgiving in the United States, one of the biggest events in the country's calendar. And food plays a big part in the holiday. But as prices rise, more families are struggling to buy what they need, while food banks are also seeing their costs go up. Hendrik Sybrandy reports from Colorado.
Outside a Denver Human Services office, staffers and volunteers with Food Bank of the Rockies set up a mobile pantry. A wide menu of food items is prepared to be distributed to people in need, some of whom are lined up in their cars already.
In a typical week at this particular pantry, we could have anywhere from 75 to 100 families coming through. We anticipate maybe some more because we're so close to the holidays.
It promises to be a busy morning here.
So we're going to need 2 people, one right there and one here for traffic.
These boxes are essential for many.
Not having enough money for the holidays to buy food, and actually a lot of things on the shelf that you really need is gone or it's too expensive. So this here helps me.
Higher inflation has driven up food costs significantly across the U.S.
The prices of groceries have completely skyrocketed. It's really insane.
Cost of living is high, gas is high.
Yes.
I don't know. It's a constant struggle. It's very frustrating.
That struggle is now shared by this food provider. 80% of what Food Bank of the Rockies hands out is donated by retailers, manufacturers, and agricultural partners. It pays for the rest.
The amount of money that we are spending on food has more than tripled in the last 2.5 years. We're now spending almost $1 million every single month.
For example, the cost of beef has gone up 27% over the past year. Vegetable oil is up 54%, and canned fruit another 30%. Freight costs for the organization are up 25%, and some temporary U.S. government food commodities are not available. Many food banks are also dealing with supply chain issues. This trend and the need for help escalated when the pandemic hit.
I've never used assistance, food assistance, government assistance in my life, and I'm very grateful that it's available. I didn't know it was available, and if it wasn't available, I don't know what I would be doing right now.
I'm a single dad raising 3 girls and 2 boys on my own.
For Ernest Watson and many he knows, it's a daily struggle to get by.
It's ridiculous, even the gas. I mean, California is $5 a gallon. Like, low-income people, how can we afford that? You know, we barely trying to make it on ends meet now. This helps out tremendously.
Food Bank of the Rockies, which says each dollar buys 4 meals, is counting on the public to remain in a giving mood. 40% of its annual revenue comes at year's end.
We're not sure if the inflation that we've seen with food costs are going to maintain, but we're bracing for that.
These folks and others like them are counting on this service for the holidays and beyond. Hendrik Sybrandy, CGTN, Denver.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, Greece says tourism is largely back on track, but there are some cold, hard winter months ahead for an industry reeling from the pandemic.
It's the first day in Germany that vaccination centers like this one are offering a third jab.
There are fears there could be a fifth wave of COVID-19 cases.
Market watchers have a keen eye on infection rates,
safety and efficacy of COVID-19 shots.
France closed schools in the first lockdown in spring last year.
France has been a leader in vaccinating youngsters.
If a spike necessitates another lockdown,
Italy is now close to reaching its target of immunising 80% of the population over the age of 12.
On the agenda with me, Stephen Cole, we look up into space. We look down into data. We look at debt. We look at politics. We look at opioids, climate change. We look at all the issues that really matter around the world. But you matter too. We want to tell the stories you want to see and hear about. Make it your agenda.
The agreement is signed. But what is the real deal now the UK has left the EU? For trade, for business, for the city, for ordinary people. Make sense of Brexit with CGTN.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos? And unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe with Jamie Owen and Robin Dwyer. Our top stories. After months of negotiations, Germany gets a new government, its first ever three-party coalition.
Our other headlines: Poland warns lockdowns could return if COVID cases don't drop, as the EU says European countries should consider boosters for all adults.
And Japan becomes the latest country to release its oil reserves in a bid to cool the cost of crude.
Now, it's been tried in science fiction movies. Now, NASA has launched a spacecraft to knock an asteroid off course. If this test is successful, similar missions could be launched to stop large objects from hitting planet Earth and avoid what could be a global catastrophe.
Professor James Head is a geologist at Brown University and helped to choose landing sites for the Apollo moon program. I asked him about the complexity of this mission.
Well, it's really interesting. I mean, I think we all think about this is not just another mission to another really exciting planetary body, but it's all about us. It's about, indeed, it's a technological test to see if we can attack a common threat. We all think about, okay, you know, national threats. What's the United States doing? What's China doing? What's Russia doing? This is a common threat to the whole planet. So we know that asteroids come in. They're not all out there in the asteroid belt. There are a lot of them running around the inner solar system. And they pose a really, really major threat to us. And so the idea here is this is a technological test to fly out to a double asteroid, hit the asteroid, see how much it changes the course. This will not hit Earth at all, but in the future, this is a test to see how we can actually redirect an asteroid away from the Earth. So we'll hit the asteroid and then observe its variation over a long period of time to see how well it does and then revisit it in the coming years.
So why did they choose this particular asteroid? It's not a danger to Earth. Why this one?
Well, it's really the optimal situation for a test. It's one small asteroid in orbit around another one. And so by looking at the redirection, we can actually track it much more easily from the Earth, as opposed to one that's just flying by and going off by itself. So this really gives us an optimum opportunity to be able to actually see how much the impact changes it. And there's a small Italian, this is a very international mission. This is a small Italian satellite on board that will be launched as it approaches the asteroid. It'll take pictures of it. And then here we'll go back to the European Space Agency in a couple of years with Japan and others, and we will be looking at the impact point to assess all the details. This is what we need to know before we can actually effectively learn how to redirect one that's coming directly to Earth.
So you said that asteroids represented a major threat, but how real really is the danger of Earth being hit by objects from space?
Well, the tricky part is, this is actually two parts. The first thing we need to know is where the asteroids are and how many they are. And so basically we don't know. We don't know. There are tens of thousands of them out there, but we only know where a few are. So the first part of the long-term planetary defense is to find these things and look at them. And we know they have a major effect. For example, in 1908, the Tunguska event really flattened a significant part of the forest in Siberia. These are energies that are more than the atomic bombs, for example. And in Chelyabinsk, not too many years ago, basically in Russia, there was a very near miss with a huge structure, asteroid coming in, comet, etc., and that really caused a lot of damage. Fortunately, not many people were hurt or killed, but indeed we know that these are coming. We just can't predict exactly when. We did not see the Chelyabinsk one coming because it was coming from towards the sun, so we couldn't see it. So that's another clear and present danger. So the first thing is a sky survey. All countries should be looking out there, tracking where these are. And secondly, we'll send this redirect mission, which is on its way today, which will help us to understand how we can then find the ones that are coming in and deflect them away from a catastrophic impact on the Earth. It's a really common planetary defense. We should all countries should be working on this together.
The fourth wave of coronavirus across Europe could scupper the continent's hopes of a strong economic recovery from the pandemic. That's according to EU commissioners. Officials have warned that growing inflation and supply chain shortages are combining with rising COVID cases to create a rather downbeat economic picture. Well, let's talk to our correspondent Giles Gibson, who's watching events in Brussels for us. Giles, so here we are, end of November. We're talking about lockdowns. How's that changing the economic picture?
Well, Jamie, in just a matter of weeks, we've seen coronavirus restrictions coming roaring back here in Europe. Of course, you have that full lockdown that's been put in place in Austria. You have a partial lockdown in the Netherlands and also tighter restrictions in countries such as Belgium, where I am. And we've also seen some violent protests breaking out on the streets, including here in Brussels, against these returning restrictions. However, European officials, as they unveiled the European semester autumn package, this is a way of coordinating economic policy between member states, were insisting that this is not going to be a repeat of 2020, at least economically speaking. Here's Paolo Gentiloni, who's the European Commissioner for Economy.
These developments will have a certain impact on our economies, especially on contact-intensive services. To be clear, we do not expect them to have anything like the same impact on economic activity as the lockdowns of last winter.
And European officials are also sticking to their forecasts in terms of growth for the EU, saying that it's going to grow by 5% GDP in 2020 and then 4.3% in 2022.
And Giles, it's not just worries about COVID. There are other headwinds that European countries are facing this winter, aren't there?
Yeah, we saw Paolo Gentiloni, the European Commissioner for Economy, listing 3 headwinds that could really threaten the economic recovery from the pandemic here in Europe. Firstly, COVID, as we've just been discussing, as well as inflation and also supply chain issues. Inflation here in the Eurozone hit 4.1% in October, driven a lot by that dramatic surge in energy prices that we've seen all over the world, really, in recent months. Meanwhile, in terms of supply chain issues, those are still just dragging on for companies big and small here in Europe. I mean, just take the car industry in Germany, for example. They're still struggling to get hold of semiconductors, those sort of microchips that are absolutely crucial for all the different electronic elements of a brand new car. And just finally, Jamie, the European Commission are also warning about 5 countries that they say have high levels of debt. Belgium, France, Greece, Italy and Spain. The EC saying that they need to start getting those levels under control in the coming years.
Giles, we shall no doubt discuss that on another day. For the moment, Giles Gibson in Brussels, thank you very much.
Electric vehicle sales raced ahead in China in October to a record 383,000 vehicles.
And they're stealing the limelight at the Guangzhou Auto Show. Huang Fei reports.
Electric coupe concept, electric supercar SUV, high-end cars. Established car giants and upstarts are competing to show off their latest models in 16 halls at the Canton Fair complex, spread over an area of 220,000 square meters. There are nearly 1,020 vehicles on display, the highest in recent years, despite a reduction in the total number of exhibitors. But there is also a bright spot. There has been a steady stream of visitors to the expo, with many of them keen to see and experience the latest green cars on display.
I've come to check out the latest new energy vehicles from various companies. I plan to buy an electric vehicle because they're intelligent, environmentally friendly, and gasoline-free. It is also cheaper to power a car with electricity.
I want to buy an EV because it's popular and there is now an established charging network across the country. EVs are convenient for commuting and cost less money.
At this year's Guangzhou Auto Show, more than 240 models are new energy vehicles, up 70% from a year ago. Some companies have launched their latest electric vehicles with advanced technologies, such as high-performance batteries that can run for 1,000 kilometers on a single charge. Electrification is not the only bet. Some companies believe vehicles in the future will be more intelligent and autonomous. It'll be more than a means of transportation for people. Instead, it'll be an eco-friendly and smart helper that knows you well.
With the advent of the autonomous driving era, a vehicle would not be just a means for transportation. It could be your workplace, resting place, diner, or a self-driving delivery vehicle. Your hands, eyes, and feet will be free so that you can do more things in the car.
Vehicles on display at the expo reflect the changing trends in the world's biggest auto market, especially at a time when the entire automobile industry is undergoing a massive transformation. But one thing is becoming increasingly clear. Vehicles of the future will be more electric, autonomous, connected, share, and intelligent. Huang Fei, CGTN, Guangzhou.
China says it's firmly opposed to the United States inviting Taiwan to what it's calling a summit for democracy next month. The invitation has been extended to Taipei alongside over 100 governments to take part in a discussion hosted by the White House. The Chinese Foreign Ministry says Taiwan is an inalienable part of China's territory.
The One China principle is a universally recognized norm in international relations. Taiwan has no other status in international law except as a part of China. What the United States has done just proves that democracy is just a lie. It is a tool used by the United States to promote its geostrategic objectives, suppress other countries, split the world, and serve itself and its own interests.
Sweden has voted its first ever woman Prime Minister into office. Magdalena Andersson, who was formerly the finance minister, is replacing Stefan Löfven as leader of the centre-left Social Democrats. She's set to form a two-party minority government with the Greens, but she faces an immediate challenge with the latest government budget expected to be rejected by left-wing parties in Sweden's parliament.
France, Germany and the UK are the latest Western countries to urge their nationals to leave Ethiopia as the security situation deteriorates. The year-long civil war is escalating as forces from the Tigray People's Liberation Front advance closer to the capital. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has vowed to lead soldiers into battle against the Tigrayan rebels.
Iran says it's agreed to further talks with the United Nations nuclear watchdog after both sides failed to reach a deal on resuming inspections of its nuclear facilities. The IAEA says Iran has refused access to the Karaj complex despite promising it 2 months ago. The watchdog says the sticking point could endanger nuclear talks due to start on Monday.
A child has become the 6th person to die after a car was driven into a parade in Wisconsin in the United States. 8-year-old Jackson Sparks died after he was hit by the vehicle along with his brother. Prosecutors have charged Darrell Brooks with first-degree intentional homicide with a hearing scheduled for January. He faces a mandatory life sentence if convicted.
New Zealand's government says international visitors will be allowed to enter the country again from April. Fully vaccinated travellers will be able to visit for the first time in 2 years. The country has had some of the world's strictest travel rules since the pandemic, during which time many New Zealanders living abroad have been unable to return.
Greek tourism is almost back to pre-pandemic levels, with the number of tourists arriving this summer almost 3/4 of the amount visiting in 2019.
But with new measures in place to curb the spike of COVID cases and the summer season over, Greece is now concentrating on saving its winter tourism season. Evangelos Tsipsas reports from Athens.
Vaccines, tests, and social restrictions have all been deployed in Greece's fight against COVID-19 in a bid to encourage people to travel to its summer holiday destinations. And their efforts were rewarded. Summer tourism saw numbers at 75% of 2019 levels, with arrivals surpassing government's targets. The Minister of Tourism attributed the success to the country's vaccination rollout program.
Our pre-bookings from October of this year, aiming the summer of 2022, are 30% increased from the bookings we had at October 19 for summer 19, prior to the pandemic. And one after the other, I visit big touristic shows in important countries, and the deals we sign with airline companies are widely increased in number of seats and travelers for 2022.
Despite the increase in COVID cases globally, the number of international air travelers to Greece rose further in October, according to data from the Civil Aviation Authority. Arrivals more than doubled last month from around 700,000 visitors in 2019 to 1.6 million, reflecting something of a recovery in air traffic up to 70%. That amounts to 32 million passengers at a time when COVID cases continue to rise across the country. Despite this, Greek authorities are optimistic 2022 will prove an even better year for the crucial tourism sector.
Well, first of all, that's a global industry, and it is affected in that way. And the virus knows no borders. So the more we have weapons from science and vaccination is on the top shelf, the better we can be protected, the safer we can travel, the more we can all enjoy a touristic experience. We've proved that we have organized an exquisite vaccination program, and that was a key of our success.
Being praised for its swift measures, Greece was able to keep its tourism industry up and running this summer season, matching somewhat its pre-pandemic levels. While efforts were made to save the summer of 2020 and 2021, those depending on winter visitors are now pinning all their hopes on a few weekends and the upcoming holidays.
What we see is that I wouldn't put it in terms of summer and winter. There are some parts of tourism that have not seen the rebound yet, like leisure did during the summer. Business tourism, exhibitions, conferences are still on hold for many reasons. Budget-wise, let's not forget that the 2021 budgets were decided in 2020, so within lockdown. We expect this to be rising from spring and on.
The requirements for travelers to Greece remain the same as in the summer: proof of vaccination or a negative PCR test 72 hours upon arrival. But with only 61% of the population fully vaccinated, the country is muling more restrictive measures seen in other European countries. With thousands of jobs on the line, Greece needs to make sure its winter tourism season isn't a wipeout. Evangelos Tsipsas for CGTN, Athens.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead. From the Imperial Palace to the auction house, one of the world's rarest carpets goes under the hammer, fetching millions. We'll find out why it's so special.
Each day,
There are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there to see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you, all around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London, China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
Mari, what would you say is a good question?
Stephen, I'd say it's one where there's always more than one answer.
The Answers Project is a new podcast series from CGTN Europe. With me, Stephen Cole.
And me, Mari Beveridge. In each episode, we'll take a complex question.
And with the help of some of the world's foremost experts, shine light on some of the answers. So join us for The Answers Project.
Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello, welcome back to Global Business Europe. The World Table Tennis Championships are underway in Houston.
A star-studded gala has been held to commemorate the 50th anniversary of ping-pong diplomacy, when young American and Chinese table tennis players formed a friendship at the 1971 World Championships.
It heralded a thaw in diplomatic relations between the two countries. Tony Waterman reports.
A night dedicated to 50 years of ping-pong diplomacy, celebrated in the most natural way. With paddlers from that famed 1971 U.S. table tennis team playing a friendly round with their Chinese peers. Connie Suarez and Judy Horfrost, just some of the hundreds gathered from all corners of the world to honor the legacy and lessons of the small ball that moved the big ball in China-U.S. relations.
We understand and embrace its long-lasting significance. As a friendship that still cherishes after 50 years, we care for each other deeply.
Ping-pong diplomacy paved the way for then U.S. President Richard Nixon's historic visit to China in 1972. Joining him on that trip was Dr. Henry Kissinger, who had secretly flown to China in the months before for talks with Premier Zhou Enlai, trying to build a bridge to peace.
Even seemingly peripheral events can contribute to international understanding and to peace among two great nations.
In the 50 years since, the China-U.S. relationship has experienced its fair share of ups and downs, becoming particularly strained in recent years. The Chinese ambassador to the U.S., Qin Gang, said the relationship is at a new crossroads, but pointed to the values of table tennis as a guiding light towards the next chapter.
We do sometimes compete, but we should follow and recognize rules like table tennis players. Have fair and healthy competition, respect each other, appreciate each other, learn from each other, and make progress together.
That message has once again been brought to life through table tennis. The first ever China-U.S. mixed doubles teams played their first games on Tuesday, both winning and advancing to the next round.
Tuesday night's gala was a tribute to the 50th anniversary of ping-pong diplomacy, but it was also a chance to take those lessons of friendship and human-to-human connections into the next 50 years. Tony Waterman, CGTN, Houston, Texas.
A Chinese imperial carpet described as phenomenally rare has been sold at auction in Paris for $7.6 million.
It was once a centerpiece of the Imperial Palace in Beijing's Forbidden City. Ross Cullen reports.
We're at the auction house where earlier this very impressive carpet sold for a final post-commission price of $7.6 million. Here at Christie's, the hammer fell after 13 minutes of tense bidding by two rival online offers. The carpet was woven in the 16th century during the Ming dynasty in China. It is made of sheep's wool and goat hair with silk woven through it. It is adorned with 2 dragons, each with 5 claws, who are fighting one another for the flaming seed pearl. That is the blue and gold circle in the centre of the carpet, which represents longevity, prosperity and wealth. The Ming Emperor's throne would have been placed just above the seed pearl. Its attributes are all things with which an emperor would have wanted to be associated. You can see the foaming waves of the ocean below and the blue clouds in the sky above. The emperor would have sat halfway between them, symbolizing the imperial dynasty's connection between heaven and earth. The carpet was initially woven in red thread, but over the last 500 years has faded to a golden yellow. The carpet is just one of 39 which were retrieved from the imperial palace. There would originally have been hundreds of such ornate rugs, but over time they have either been lost or damaged beyond repair. This majestic artwork, which was described by the auction house as extraordinary and phenomenally rare, will now go from here in the French capital to its new home after being acquired by an Asian buyer. Ross Cullen, CGTN, Paris.
The headlines again. After months of negotiations, Germany gets a new government, its first ever 3-party coalition.
The head of the World Health Organization says Europe has a false sense of security over vaccine protection as it finds itself once again at the center of the pandemic.
And Japan becomes the latest country to release its oil reserves in a bid to cool the cost of crude.
That's it for Global Business Europe. Thanks for watching.
More on all of our stories at europe.cgtn.com, and do follow CGTN Europe on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram.
We're on smart TV apps, Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire and Android TV, YouTube and Dailymotion, cgtn.com and the CGTN app, and in the UK on Freeview.
Coming up next on CGTN, it's Africa Live. We'll see you again tomorrow, same time, same place. From all of the team in London, it's goodbye.
Goodbye.